the ground. You glad to be back? Or you want to go back up again?
I'll do it again any day of the week.
One sec. All right, good. Thank you. I want to make a couple comments about the video. Number one, it's good that this audience is, you know, sometimes I speak to college students and they forget who Christopher Reeve was. You know, I tell them to Google it a little bit. But, because Chris died in 2004, and as all of us know, he was a Superman on the big screen, but he was a bigger Superman in real life, and he was an amazing advocate, and he was a hero to me. And just to let you know, right now, the Daniel Heumann Fund for Spinal Cord Research was a foundation that my parents started after I got hurt, and in 2007, the Daniel Heumann Fund joined the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation, and within the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation, I became a member of their board, and I established within their organization the Daniel Heumann Young Scientist Fund, because I truly believe if we're going to find cures for any disease, or spinal cord injury, or cancers, or whatever it is, we really have to support young scientists, because they're really innovative, creative, they think outside the box, and that's one of my big interests. The next thing I want to mention to you is, as you saw, I married way over my head. That goes without saying. I married into the reason you saw me in some Michigan gear is I live in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I married into 4 generations of Michigan alums. So the situation is that I go to Michigan games, but Syracuse is my #1 school. It's my team. Michigan is #2, and I have a separate closet at home where one stuff is all Syracuse stuff, and everything, and the other stuff is Michigan. And my boss, who many of you will recognize his name, Pete Sala, says to me, when you come up to Syracuse, you leave all your Michigan stuff in Ann Arbor, and you can only wear Syracuse. And I said, you know what, Pete, I have no problems with that. But it makes for an interesting existence. And the other thing I wanted to let you know is that besides all those other wonderful things I just mentioned, I also play wheelchair tennis. And I play it competitively. I play not just against people in wheelchairs, but I play able-bodied tennis. The greatest thing about wheelchair tennis is that it's the only sport that somebody with a disability like mine can compete against regular able-bodied folks like yourselves. The only difference in the rules is I get 2 bounces versus 1 bounce. So it's great, and I play doubles. I'm a USTA 3, I'm between a 3-0 and a 3-5 player, and I just love ripping the ball up the line. And one of my big things that I'd love to do is to build a tennis center at the university that we can, because the current tennis center where it is right now, the Drumlin Center, where it is just, it's not a nice facility, and it's not wheelchair accessible at all, and I can't even play there. So, you know, it's tough. So one of my dreams is someday to build a beautiful tennis facility, but of course I got to find a donor to do that, because like everything else, it all comes down to priorities and money. To get into a little bit of my background is I grew up in Riverdale, New York. I'm 50, I just turned 50 years old. One of the greatest things is that I was destined to come to Syracuse because the middle numbers of my social security is 44. So I guess when I came out, it was, you know, preordained that I would be an Orangeman. And one of the greatest things about it is that during my life, you know, I really didn't think about Syracuse so much until I was in high school. And it all started when, you know, ESPN came about, and you'll hear this when John comes, and the Big East, and watching with all my friends in New York City. I went to private school in New York City. I couldn't believe the Carrier Dome. And when I came to Syracuse on my feet in November of '84, it was very funny. I was one of these very, let me put it there. I was growing up in New York City, I'll be honest, I was obnoxious, and so, you know, I had a little bit of a shtick to me. So when I came to campus, you know, I did pretty well in high school, but, you know, there were things where I was lacking in science and math. And so my mother came up with this amazing idea to create a photo album of all my activities, like tennis. I was a big tennis player when I was on my feet. And I did a lot of theater in high school. So she put this beautiful photo album together, and she says, listen, when you go into your college interviews, just show them the photo album. Maybe they won't look at what you did in math, or maybe they won't look at your SAT scores, and they'll see you for the fun-loving guy that you truly are. Well, it worked in some place. It worked, I have to say, it didn't work on one of my first, it didn't work at Skidmore. But when I went to Syracuse, for whatever reason, the woman I met with, and her name is Susan Donovan, she lives here in Fayetteville, she's retired. It worked, and I knew right away because she asked my father to come into the interview, and the minute she says, so Daniel, tell me a little bit about, you know, your grade here in math. Do you want to see my photo album? Yeah, and thank God it worked. And the happiest day of my life is when I got my acceptance letter to Syracuse. I'll never forget it. It was March of '85, and I was sky high that I was finally going to be liberated, and I was going to get out of my parents' house, and, you know, everything, the stars were aligned, all my dreams came true. And then that summer of '85, I went up back to Camp Baco in Minerva, New York. I went there for 8 years as a camper, and it was my first year as a counselor. And I went up there, and I had, as I said, Ryan was in my bunk, Murray's son, and great group of kids. And camp to me was the greatest thing in the world. I love, to this day, I still go up to camp. It's just part of my life. And so what happened was on August 13th at about 11:30, we were all counselors. There were no drugs or alcohol involved. My friend who was driving, who lives in Bridgewater, came from Bridgewater, New Jersey, where Ricky lives, Lois's son. He lost control around a curve. He was speeding, and he was killed, and 2 guys walked out without a scratch, and I broke my back from the chest down, and I was a T6. I was diagnosed as a T6 paraplegic, and this happened 2 weeks before I was supposed to begin at Syracuse. But the saving grace was, and I'm saying it now, the saving grace, and you'll understand this when I tell this part of the story. Rewind now for a moment. 2 weeks before my accident, I was up in Syracuse as an able-bodied for summer registration. And I met a wonderful gentleman who's one of my closest friends to this day, a man by the name of Barry Wells, who was the Associate Dean of Arts and Sciences at the time. And he gave this presentation and I'll never forget, in Gifford Auditorium, where he said to all the incoming students, look to your left, look to your right, one of you is going to be on academic probation and you're going to have to deal with me. I didn't understand. They weren't looking to their left or to their right. Everybody was looking at me because I was sitting back there very comfortable, ready to have a good time. And then my parents, being overprotective Jewish parents from New York City, managed their way into Krause College, where they got to listen to this wonderful woman who's a very dear friend of the Chiriellos. Grace Severino was the director of the parents' office. Her husband, Jerry, was a history teacher, may he rest in peace, at Jamesville Dewitt High School. And Grace gave this amazing presentation to the parents. And of course, my parents, after she was done, glommed onto her. And I met her and her husband later. But after my accident, Grace, when I was lying in intensive care with a broken back, my father called her and she said to my dad, when Daniel is ready, we will do whatever it takes to make sure he will be comfortable and that he will be successful and that he will graduate from Syracuse. Now, you have to understand, this was in 1985, before the Americans with Disabilities Act. So Syracuse could have said, you know what, Danny, I don't think it's a good idea that you come here. Maybe you go to a university, you know, down south or out west. But no. So when I heard those words, I knew that I had to do whatever in my power to get to Syracuse. So what happened was, I found out I was in the hospital basically from August to December, including rehab and surgery. I had Harrington rods in my back, and the doctor, and what happened was then I was told, you know, that I had to go to school before I could come to Syracuse, because I had to get this whole feeling of what it would be like to be in a classroom with people with other people in wheelchairs, without people in wheelchairs, being the only one in the classroom. So I went, and I went to Manhattan College near my house, and I got a great education. I took one class there, I got an A, and the next thing you know, thank God, the following year I came to Syracuse. Now Syracuse, you know, as I came to the campus, you know, here I am now in a wheelchair trying to figure out how my body is going to work. And, you know, and I was doing and I went to upstate to do rehab with all the inmates from Auburn Penitentiary. That was something I'll never forget for 5 years, 3 days a week at upstate on the 7th floor. The stories that I was told, I mean, the education I got in this town was unbelievable. But the university shaped me. I mean, they took a scared boy and took him, a lump of clay. I was literally a lump of clay when I came to this university, and they sculpted me into a man. And when it was time for me to graduate, I wanted to thank the university for everything they did for me. I wanted to thank the students. So for one day, I wanted to be up on my feet so I could look my fellow students in the eye and thank them for everything they did for me. So I trained on these braces and crutches. And that's how I got to also know, well, Pete and I knew each other because there's another story I always gloss over. I was the first disabled mascot in the United States. In the early years, I was the Orange Wheel of Syracuse, but I don't really talk about that much because that was now my friends make fun of me to this day, all my alums, so I really don't talk about it. They always want footage, and they put pictures up about that on Facebook. But Pete and I, he opened the Carrier Dome to me back in the day, and I would train there with lacrosse balls whizzing past my head. I would deal with footballs and basketballs, and I'll tell you a funny story. Coach Boeheim wasn't married at the time, and I had this really beautiful trainer. And I always thought, oh, he's so wonderful how every time he comes up to me and wants to be so friendly, and he's so, and I said, personality is so effusive with me, you know, and I said, but that's not really him, so I don't understand what's going on. Oh, I know why he keeps coming up to me during practice and wondering how I'm doing. So it was but coach was wonderful to me, everybody at the university, and so to do that on graduation, I walked twice. I walked at the convocation, and I walked again at the main graduation, and it was an achievement of a lifetime. And then the greatest thing happened that day too. In the benediction, I was also very good friends with the dean of Hendricks Chapel, and he talked about heroes. So he's talking about Martin Luther King, he's talking about Jesus, Gandhi, a number of them, Moses came up, and then all of a sudden I hear Danny Heumann, and I'm like, and my parents couldn't believe it either. And from that event, the respect level that my dad had for me went up, was immeasurable, and that really meant a lot to me too as a graduate. So one of the things I also want to talk to you about, and the main thing is, what I did. One of the things I've done as a lawyer, I've done a lot of lobbying and public policy work in my life for biotechnology, and now I'm here at the university. I come every 2 weeks to work in campus planning, design, and construction. We're doing a whole transformation of the campus. I know there was a big article today in the Dome that nothing's happening right now, but that's a different story. If you have any questions about that, I'll answer them as best as that I can. But we're doing a lot on the campus, and this is the first chancellor in the history of Syracuse that's really making accessibility a priority. And that's one of the reasons why I'm here, is because I got to know the chancellor through our Ann Arbor connections. We have very similar friends in the Ann Arbor area. And one of the greatest things, and I'll tell you why the chancellor likes when I come to the suite on football Saturdays, is because he's a huge Michigan fan. And when Michigan's playing at the same time as Syracuse, he clears the path for me when I come in, because I bring my iPad with me. And he moves everybody out of the way, and he says, okay, you sit right here. And I set up the iPad in the suite, and all of a sudden he starts sitting next to me. And then he says to me, oh God, I forgot I gotta go socialize with everybody. He says, let me get up and go. But, so we have a lot of fun with, our Michigan connections, and so that's one of the reasons why I came to the university, was to help him in this mission. And then the other thing I'm doing, of course, is all hands on deck, is to help raise money for a lot of these projects that are going on at the university. And I love relationships and relationship building and networking with my fellow alums to help raise money for the university as well. And then the other thing I'd like to discuss with you and finish up in 5 minutes, so we can get to Q&A, is this whole premise of how to overcome adversity and manage change effectively. It's one of my favorite things to talk about when I talk to corporate audiences. I talk about 4 attributes necessary for success in life, and I learned these attributes at Syracuse. The 4 attributes are courage, persistence, attitude, and the importance of asking for help. And boy, do I do that all the time. And I look at courage as and all of us here in this room could tell the same story about how to overcome adversity and manage change effectively. And when I think about adversity, it's like and change, it's the yin and the yang. We deal with adversity every day of our lives, and we deal with change. And for me, change was something that was hugely illustrated, that it happened to me in a matter of minutes, that my life changed all of a sudden, and I had to adapt to that change. So the first 18 years of my life, you know, were over like that, and I had to now forge on for the last, the math isn't so good, 30 some odd years since then. I've been in a chair 32 years, so more than half my life I've been sitting in a wheelchair. And those attributes have helped me tremendously, because I realize that if the hardest thing for me every day is to get out of bed. And if I get out of bed, I know that I can have a successful day, that I persist, do everything I have to do, drive 7 hours to come to Syracuse from Ann Arbor. I love the time I spend in Canada. It's so tranquil. I turn off CNN and all the things, and I just enjoy the beautiful Canadian wilderness. And one of the nice things also about driving, that I love to drive, is the being free and having that ability to go from point A to point B, even in a wheelchair, with no, you know, encumbrances, where I'm in control versus somebody else being in control. And attitude, I learned early on, if I didn't display a positive attitude, and it goes for all of us, people wouldn't respond positively to me. And all of us, attitude doesn't belong to us, it belongs to everybody we come in contact with, and that's how we're judged. And the last thing is, you know, the importance of asking for help, because if we come out of our silos and ask people for help, you know, they feel comfortable enough and feel vulnerable enough to be able to ask the same of us. And I've learned that, you know, people are always scared about being vulnerable in this life. You know, I'm vulnerable every day when I come out in my orange wheelchair and make the best out of it. So I want to leave you with this quote, because I'm right on schedule. It's from this artist called Eminem in Michigan. And it's, look, if you had one shot, one opportunity to seize everything you ever wanted, one moment, would you capture it or let it slip? So thank you very much. I'm open to any questions about anything. I hope some of these pictures have prompted you to ask me some questions about being a father and a husband and all those wonderful things that I get to be doing. So thank you. Questions?
Where do you get an orange wheelchair?
I ordered it. Believe it or not, I had a yellow wheelchair before, and I was told when I started working at the university last May to get that yellow wheelchair out of here. And it was yellow and blue, maize and blue, so Pete used to come up to me every day at my desk, when's that wheelchair coming, when's that wheelchair coming? So I ordered it in Ann Arbor and got my orange wheelchair. And what's really nice is, in the past, when Syracuse and Michigan have played, all the people that I see at the games and the ushers and the event management people know that I will always be in full Syracuse regalia in Ann Arbor when Syracuse is on the campus. And that was the first time I was ever in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Little did I know I'd be married in Michigan, living there with a wife and daughters, when Donovan McNabb went in 1998 and blew Michigan out. And it was the happiest day of my life. I was there, and I'll never forget it as long as I live. And it was amazing. And there I am, living there every day. So let me ask the gentleman. I'll get you Lois.
Danny, you provide us with a very inspirational story. We have, our generation, our overlapping generations, have had the benefit of participating in and observing various positive social movements, including the disability rights movement, which, among other things, gave rise to the Americans with Disabilities Act. So I think that, unfortunately, certain wars have generated a lot of physical and mental disability situations, tragically, and that's kind of added probably to the momentum of helping disabled people. But anyway, my question has to do with, I have 3 sons, 2 of whom have fairly serious psychiatric disabilities, and one son who has an ongoing significant physical challenge. And I've observed actually the greater difficulty of the 2 sons who have the psychiatric disabilities in grappling with their situations, because if your mind isn't working well, it just makes everything more difficult. So my question has to do with, you had to have been seized with, when this accident occurred, an immediate crushing feeling of unfairness, depression, whatever. How did you work your way beyond that initial attitude to the positive place that you reached?
Took a lot of effort, a lot of support. Took about 10 years to get there, when I realized that my disability wasn't going to control me, that I had to be in control of my disability. You know, the smartest thing I did, and I have intellectual disabilities also. I have a visual perceptual learning disability, and I suffer from ADHD, which is a really tough one in a wheelchair, because you got constant. The hardest thing for me is when I have to go in the office and sit in front of my computer and knock out all this work and write reports and things like that, because it's so hard for me to focus, so I have to take medication for that. It's about the community, the people that I've involved myself with, and the fact that I immersed myself right off the bat, and my parents didn't make life comfortable for me. They didn't make their house too wheelchair accessible for me, for various reasons, but to this day, looking at it, I was mad about it for years, but I'm glad they did it that way, because it made me want to get out even more, because I basically went from this feeling of euphoria to now this feeling of back to where I started as a kid, and that year was just horrible, not being able to go away for the summer, because I was doing outpatient physical therapy before I could go to Syracuse, and that was the worst summer of my life. But you grin and bear it, and I look at it right now, and the fact that I immersed myself in school, and then also after, when I was done with Syracuse, 2 years being out and about and learning the ways of the world and being an advocate, because that's where my background really cemented itself, is at Syracuse. I had to be an advocate for change. I was advocating for doors with power doors and ramps where there were no ramps and all these things. And in those days, I didn't have the law. I had Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, but I didn't have what I have at our disposal now in terms of awareness, in terms of the legal ability to, put that in front of people's administrators' faces. I had to, show them the cost-benefit analysis of doing it, because things weren't done out of the goodness of people's hearts. Things were done out of, well, how's that going to benefit also everybody else? And I was able to make those arguments, because I would say, who knows, maybe someday you'll need this ramp. All of us at some point in our lives are going to be disabled or not being able to access things the way we used to access things while we were healthy and young. So things change. Did I answer it pretty?
Absolutely. One of the great, at least for me, inspirational things in life is when I see someone with an obvious major disability functioning in a grocery store or whatever the environment is.
Yeah.
It sort of puts into perspective your own problems.
Right.
And I don't know if this occurred when you were at SU, but we had a neighbor who was a football player on the SU football team. who happened to be working at a brewery.
Yeah, I know exactly who you, I know exactly. He's a very good friend of Pete's.
Yeah, a keg exploded.
Yeah,
And his whole life was
right,
a similar situation.
Yep.
Wheelchair bound
yep,
for the duration.
yep,
And
I
so
know.
he had to
Yep.
adapt to an instant life change like you did.
yeah. It's not for the weak and meek, let me just tell you. It's for the, you gotta be strong-minded and just go for it, because, you know, one of the things I tell people is that the sun is gonna rise and the sun's gonna set, and it's up to me. If I wanna be a part of it, that's great. If I don't wanna be a part of it, I'm gonna be the loser in the end, because the day's gonna go on with or without me. So I have to immerse myself to be part of the day and be part of the equation. And it took me, yeah.
Immersing yourself as a child development person, how much could you do for a little one with the motoric difficulties you had when you had a baby?
Got on the ground and did what we built built a special diaper changing table, so I had my own little, I was like my own little workshop, you know, so I would get right in there, because this injury gets you ready for, if you can handle this injury, you can handle baby crap day in and day out. So I was right there. I was the best diaper changer you could. I was my little tool shed, my little tool shop when I had her up there and taking care of her. It was great. Yeah, I had no problems. You know, you learn how to adapt, and, you know, I did it. I mean, it was a miracle. I never thought, when I was hurt, I never thought in a million years when I was wheeling on the SU campus that I would be a husband and a father. This was the farthest thing from my mind. It's something I dreamed about. And now I dream it and I got it, you know, sometimes buyer's remorse, you know, no, I'm just kidding. No, but, you know, I got a lot of bosses in my house. I got the dog, my female dog. She comforts me. The minute I come in, no matter what, she's jumping on me, nice, while my wife's barking out orders and telling me, you know, you need to do this and that. You know, the minute I come in from Syracuse, so it's a challenge. Sometimes I tell people that marriage is much more difficult than paralysis, because I don't know what's coming each day. Every day is a different menu, you know? There's never the same thing on the agenda. And the agendas change in a matter of minutes, so I gotta be prepared all the time. So I know about change. You know, I've been at it for going on I know some of you have been on it a lot longer than I have, but it's been 16 years of an amazing education, because when I got married at 34, I married a cougar. She was 5 years older than me, 39. Then we had kids and she turned into a pussycat. So it worked out beautiful. It worked out beautifully, but you know, you learn right at the time when you get married, especially now, that what I learned the first 34 years of my life meant absolutely nothing. I've been totally retrained these 16 years, okay? Believe you me, I know change.
And your daughter, how has she treated the wheelchair situation?
Well, here's the thing about my daughter, with the wheelchair, is that she is extremely sensitive as a little girl. Like when she was in pre-primary, she would, when her friends would go, when they would go out in the playground and they would come back, she would be the last one in the door, inside the building. She would hold the door open to make sure all her little friends would get into would come in first. Well, that was from being with a dad in a wheelchair. And now, as a 13-year-old, and which is a beautiful thing, she's so protective of me. I can't make a move without her on my wheelchair, because she's so worried that, God forbid, I should fall out of the wheelchair, because unfortunately she's seen it in her day. She's extremely, extremely overprotective, which is great. It's great, because I know someday when that day comes, she'll always be by my side. Daughters are the greatest, you know, so and I know women are a lot smarter than men too, so I've totally been changed. I grew up in a house with My parents were European. My dad came from Germany, and my mother was from France. And, you know, I grew up in a very male-dominated, chauvinistic house. But when I came to Syracuse, I took a class called Women, Language, Culture, and Society by a professor by the name of Deborah Pello. So at my graduation party, I said to my mom, when Professor Pello came to the party, I said, this is the lady who has shattered all the things that I thought were right about how to be in any environment with women. I said, she shattered everything. My mother gave her the biggest hug and said, thank you so much. At least you cured my son. My dad was a great guy. You know, he's an element of the times. You know, he was born in 26 and came here on the last boat out of Germany. He came here in 39. And my mother came out of France in 41, which was, you know, very touch and go. And her grandparents were in concentration camp in France. And this is very interesting. I haven't even shared this with you guys. I'm going to Israel for my first time in a wheelchair, on June 11th for my daughter's bat mitzvah. And we're doing a twinning where we're going to Yad Vashem on the Tuesday before the bat mitzvah, where my daughter knows with about 20 of us are going to go, and to learn about, you know, this girl that could not be bat mitzvahed, even though they didn't do bat mitzvahs in those days, but same age as my daughter, who was killed in Auschwitz. She came from Berlin, moved to Poland, and then was killed at my daughter's age in Auschwitz. And my daughter is dedicating her bat mitzvah to this little girl in Israel. So yeah, so it's a really special ceremony, this special thing we're doing at Yad Vashem. My wife's friend has a big position at the museum, so it's going to be very moving in many respects. So I'm looking forward to go to Masada and look up at Masada and yell, "Let's go Orange!" I mean, what more I hope somebody yells back from the Dead Sea, "Let's go Orange!" You never know.
They're gonna yell, "Let's go Michigan."
Right? No, go blue. Right.
Blue.
Right. Yeah, I'll be going with some of those generational Michigan alums, so there'll be a lot of Syracuse clothing and Michigan clothing on that trip. Lois, you had a question.
Well, I was going to ask about your wife, but you talked about her. Have you seen a lot of advances along this whole line with it? Have they come up with stuff with stem cell or?
Well, there are a lot of clinical trials.
Lot of
And one of the things I'm interested in doing here in Syracuse, because we have, you know, the city of Syracuse, you know, with Bristol Myers Squibb here, you know, we have a history of and my friend Carmine used to work for was a chemist who's here, used to work here in Syracuse at Bristol Myers. And from a pharmaceutical and research point of view, between Rochester, Syracuse, I'd like to create a really steadfast regenerative medicine corridor and bring these type of jobs, high-paying jobs, to this area of where we can really do, you know, great research and keep our graduates from leaving this area and have them work here and in good paying jobs and create companies, you know, do technology transfers where we're creating intellectual property at the university. All this has never happened. This is what happens at Michigan every day. They create billions of dollars between the intellectual property that they creating companies within the university. I mean, these are the things now we're in the process right now of hiring a vice president of research at the university, which will be huge. That we'll finally get into the game of doing really meritorious research, and the chancellor is very interested in getting involved in regenerative medicine. And I've talked about that because that's really the future of medicine, to be honest with you. Cellular therapies is where it's at. Yeah, and thank God the Trump administration's been so busy with anything else. We haven't heard anything like back in the day when with any sort of medical restrictions on research and things like that right now. Those things have not been happening as it was back in 2000 and, 2001 when George W. came in, and then we had a lot of issues with that. We got other issues that we're dealing with right now. So, research has been saved. Do you have a question?
Yes, so when you're on campus advocating for accessibility, if you look at one of those old Gothic buildings from the 19th century, where do you start?
A lot of the work that have been made in those buildings, those buildings are accessible now. So, and they're beautiful, but now that they've been made somewhat accessible, it's great. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I've learned this. We don't live in a perfect world. The world is never going to be made totally wheelchair accessible, but at the same time, we try to advocate for things that are possible and that are realistic. Everything is about priorities and how does that fit in fiscally. But there are things. We still have a long way to go at the university in getting things where we need to go. But our mind is on it. That's the thing. But yeah, there's still a lot to do. The good thing about my consultant gig, it's gonna be for perpetuity because there's so much to do and so many different areas to help out in. So that's fun. Other questions? Yes.
Excuse me. I was thinking, right after the accident, there must have been a period of resentment.
Oh, big time.
And I'm thinking of this poor kid that fell down the stairs at Penn State or something. In your case, you immediately said there was no alcohol because the assumption is
Right away.
maybe there was.
Drugs or alcohol. Anytime 18-year-olds are
Does
involved,
that
it's
come up
gone.
on campus where you talk about the use of drugs or alcohol? Because in so many cases, the accident could have been avoidable.
Oh, absolutely.
And how did you get over that resentment period?
It was really hard because my father and mother were so upset and angry about what happened, not just because of the way it changed my life, but in the way that it changed their life. So there was a lot of resentment there about it, even though it wasn't my fault. I was in the backseat, I wasn't driving, it was just stupid. And
Just like the parents of these kids.
Right.
That felt they
And
called
an ultimate, the stress of my situation, and because little background information, I was considered a miracle child. My parents, when they tried to have children, they weren't successful. And so what happened was they adopted my older brother, and he was born in '62. And what happened was, and you'll get a big kick out of this, I was conceived in Israel in room 928 of the Tel Aviv Hilton. So I'm a miracle child. And so when I go to Israel now in June, I've told my mother, who's 83, I'm going to the room and I'm taking a picture of where I was, because I look at myself that, they tried and everybody said, they couldn't. They tried to have kids and they couldn't, and then I was born in '67, so my dad was crushed when this happened, and he died basically 10 years afterwards with a broken heart. But he dedicated his whole life to research. He would travel, he would give up his business where he was in international trade, but he would travel all over the country and the world on his expense to meet with all the scientists that were working on trying to find a cure. So when I was first hurt, there was really not much hope. But over the years now, there's a lot more hope. And but this injury it's very, very difficult, and it doesn't get easier when you get older. It's tough. But you try to make the best every day. I'll do as much as I can for as long as I can.
Right.
So as long as I can keep driving, I'll be coming to Syracuse.
Fabulous.
I love it here. I mean, I really do. And even the winters, I mean, the winters, this winter was not as bad as winters in the past.
Nice timing.
What's that? Yeah, yeah, talk about timing. So, but, you know, you managed to get around. I'll never forget, this winter though, in December, I had to meet with the chancellor in his office, and it was December 12th. It was a huge snowstorm here in Syracuse. I used to be buried in the snow when I was a student. I mean, when I used to be in Maxwell Auditorium in class, I'll never forget, I used to come in full of snow, and after 45 minutes, the carpet would just be soaked from all the snow that came off my wheelchair and melted. But I was literally needed to be pushed into Kraus-Heinz, and I was covered in snow. And then luckily, when I left, one of the chancellor's assistants helped me to my car, because even though I have an engine now in the back of my wheelchair, I didn't have that before, that goes, helps me wheel. I should demonstrate for you. So I just push once, and it goes like this. It's called the Smart Drive. And if only I had this, 25 years ago, or 31 years ago, it would have made my life a lot easier. But, so even in the wintertime, that doesn't work that well. So I need the help. But I'm not as discriminatory when it comes to asking for help like I used to be on the Syracuse campus. I always used to ask the prettiest girls I could find to help push my wheelchair. And then I used to camp out, this is a great story, I used to camp out at the Bird Library and wait because I couldn't compete at the bars with all the able-bodied guys. So I had to be creative, innovative, and think outside the box, because even though the body was paralyzed, hormones don't get paralyzed at 18. So I waited, and I would wait by the elevators, and I would ask a nice girl, I said, "Hi, my name's Danny Heumann, could you do me a favor?" Like, was she gonna say no to the guy in the wheelchair? Could you just come behind me and give me a quick pull up on my pants? And they would help pull up, and then I would be eating at sororities. They were doing fundraisers for me on campus. I made some of the best friends that I ever made by one pull up on my pants. And it was just, oh, and now I ask my wife, when I need her to pull up my pants, "Oh, why do you have to bother me with that? There's so much else I need to be doing. Can't your daughter pull up your pants?" I'm like, "No, that's not her job. You can pull up my pants." I mean, oh, it's so funny. Yeah, yeah, it is, but it was fun, man, Who's gonna say no to the guy in the wheelchair?
Do you still need physical therapy?
I do. I go twice a week at home for
Good.
Physical therapy.
Because you don't have a big fat tummy the way.
I
some
do
people
have a big fat tummy. I'm just hiding it by going down. But, yeah, I need it because I have no feeling and no muscle in my stomach either, because I'm paralyzed from the chest down. So all I have is chest, arms, and shoulders. But I play, but I still get around in a special tennis chair where I hit that tennis ball, and that's my favorite thing to do. But I pump iron still in physical therapy and everything. But I work so hard at the university, the trainer for the basketball team told me to come on in and work out with the team and everything, but I work for Pete Sala. That doesn't happen. You don't go in because you're so busy working. And one of the things I've learned, and I'm going to tell you this, as to working for somebody like Pete, he's truly showed me the true essence of what it is to be a professional. The man is third in command at the university. It's the chancellor, the provost, and Pete Sala. And Pete has been at the university for 30 plus years. And his father, when I was a student there, John Sala, was the head of physical plant. So now his son is the head of the managing director of the Dome, head of all facilities, head of physical plant, head of campus planning, design, and construction. And one of the things I've learned is how to operate within the Pete Sala brand. And there's 3 tenets to it that I tell people is number 1, you never say no. Number 2 is if you don't know the answer to a question or it's above your pay grade, you find out who can answer that question, number 1, and get back to the person that has asked you that question. And number 3 is you make sure that that Pete Sala never gets blindsided. You make sure that if something happens, that he has to know ahead of time so he doesn't hear it from anybody else and he's aware of everything that's going on campus. And I've learned, and it's been a lesson this last year of what it is to be a really wonderful professional, and not only that, but to be accountable to so many people. Because when you work at a university, your consumers, your clients never leave. They're there forever. So, it's up to you. You have no choice but to make them happy. And it is a really tough job. But he does it beautifully, and it's been a pleasure to be part of his team and to be working with him, and it's a great opportunity. It's been an amazing opportunity. Any other questions? Oh, yeah?
Yeah. I wonder if you know how Christopher Reeve's son has done over the last number of years since his parents died.
He's done phenomenal. He graduated Middlebury College. He's on the board with me. I was just with him about 3 weeks ago at a charity hockey tournament at the Prudential Center in Newark, New Jersey. And he's on ESPN. He's got some bits on ESPN. He's on Sports Center, and he's really done really well. And his sister and his brother, they've done well too. Those are his half brother and half sister from Chris's first marriage to Gay in England. And but Dana and Chris were 2 of the most wonderful people. I mean, Dana Reeve, she gave the best hugs. I mean, she was just a tremendous woman, and for them to perish the way they did was just really, it was so sad. And when I've learned in life, and this is the most important lesson, and to tell your kids and grandkids is nobody, when we close our eyes for good, nobody's going to remember, number 1, how much money was in our bank accounts. Nobody's going to remember what car you drove. But what people are going to remember most of all, and you get it every time you read the New York Times about somebody, of what they did for the betterment of humankind, what they have done to safeguard their legacy in terms of, the ability to help people in whatever capacity that might be. And that's how I look at life, is how we can help each other and help our fellow man. And it's a challenging time in that respect. We have to, but as people and as Americans, we have to persevere and show the world, what we're truly made of. And right now we're in a little bit of a foggy period, but as true Americans, we'll find our way out and to be successful again and doing the things we need to do as human beings. So I'm confident. So thank you. Yeah, it's 11:30. Time to go.